Stockholm. She will present SPOORG, which is a cellular system and was presented in Seville. Actually, it was installed nearby our installation. And I leave the microphone to Ulrika.
Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think I hear myself, so I guess this is good. I wait for the hosts to come out here. Claudia. Anyway, I'm very happy on behalf of my colleagues in Servo, right now Chris Perry, Marceline Gao. I'm very happy to be invited here to this conference, a symposium on architecture machines. Thank you, Claudia, and Marie-Ange, who from FRAC, who's getting the coffee, and also AA, or Brett, who makes this possible. Anyway, Servo is a practice that is has offices in Stockholm and in Los Angeles and Philadelphia. We have existed since 1999. We started out as 4 members. David Erdman was 4th member, but he recently, or a few years ago, he left to start a new practice. He lectured here actually with his new partner a few weeks ago, I think even. We have mostly been invested in the relationship between architecture and technology, and especially digital technology, and how this affects both practice and architecture. We'll only talk mostly about one project today, so I have a few images just show a little bit of what we have done before, but otherwise I will focus on a project that Claudia said, SPOORG, that we exhibited at Sevilla at the BIAX Biennale. But anyway, our interest started somehow in responsiveness. But in the beginning, we were very much, like 99, 2000, very much in kind of implemented in the realm of the screen and relation to perhaps rapid prototyping and fabrication, and a kind of a user participation interest. So how can we bring in the user in the design process? Later on, we kind of moved away from that to more engage in a more spatial context, where the kind of the direct participation aspect was more of an ambient quality or an ambient character. So how can we more design with a more of a evolving architecture? This is a project called Lattice Archipelagics that was exhibited first in Graz at Latent Utopias, curated by Patrick Schumacher and Saadid. It was a collaboration with Interactive Institute Smart Studio in Stockholm. We have also done a series of competitions and a few buildings or extension to buildings, but I just passed through. We have done a series of furniture. Anyway, this is a project that we'll talk about today. SPOORG stands for semi-porous operable organisms. It relates to the aspect of something that we're interested in called the informational materialities, where we want to see how architecture can, how one can think of materiality as something that is being informed by other forces or material forces such as light, sound, sensory systems, electronics. We have also been complicating the notion of the idea of hardware and software, and looking at perhaps conflating those two and seeing them more as different degrees of materiality. In response to Friedrich Kittler, who's written the text on there is no software, where he means that actually even algorithms are just small operations that instantiates material actions, for example, within the computer, telling switches to go on and off. In that sense, the algorithm is dependent upon the physicality of the computer. But we are not so interested in saying that there is no software, rather, as I said, that software and hardware are only different degrees of materiality. And so this is something that we are heavily invested with, and how can we actually design with this? How can we think about a material practice such as Servo and how can we work with these often rest products, technologies, or perhaps that doesn't or usually get so much of a design to it. Anyway, SPOORG was a project that we first exhibited at the Mack Center in Los Angeles at the Schindler Kings Road House in the fall 2006. It was later adapted and reconfigured to work with the context of the Biennale de Arte Contemporanea de Sevilla in BX, the section of media architecture that Marie-Ange curated. It's a material system that exists of approximately 96 cells. They are functioning as some kind of a filter that filters sound and light, and operates also as a shading system. The cells are vacuum casted, and they are embedded in them are a series of microprocessors, radio transceivers, photo light sensors, and a series of speakers. There is no computer, there is a true parallel network. It processes light, so dependent on light changes in the atmosphere, or both locally as well as more globally, like what happens outside in the garden in relation to also what happens very close. It reacts to differences of light and produces a sonic behavior. Each cell doesn't have intelligence. Many of the cells has intelligence. Some of the cells have no intelligence, and some of the cells might only carry speaker system. Depending on what happens in one corner, if something is in this system, we said that a lot of change of light is something that is good. So then, if there is a lot of change, one cell will tell another cell, sending wireless radio communication, tell the neighboring cell that mimic this or mimic this behavior, and then that cell will take up that information and blend that with what's happening locally in that region. So in that sense, the sound over time emerges and evolves and creates more of a kind of a global behavior overall. They are very, very simple processors. So they are doing very simple or processing very simple data and information, but and by that creating more of a complex overall behavior. SPOORG also, of course, takes its name from the aspect of the spore, who can divide and fuse with other cells and create something that might be different from its parents. So each single SPOORG has is made out of 3 parts, and depending on how they are fusing together, they can create larger or smaller clusters. This is the context of the Schindler house, where actually we designed this off-site. We designed it in Stockholm, only knowing the mullion system of the Schindler house. We were given the nursery, and the Gen Home exhibition was also very much about architecture in relation to genetics, architecture in relation to generative design process, or something like that. And each exhibitor were given a room, and we were given the nursery. We took the nursery in a kind of a double sense, both being the nursery for the kids, but also nursery as kind of a plant house where you cultivate plants. And we're interested in the notion of cultivation. So how can one think of a system that actually needs some kind of cultivation to grow and to behave in a kind of a more of a pleasant sense? And depending on how, and this is related then to the kind of the changes of shade or the changes of light in the space. If there is a decay of changes, it will perform less or even become silent. But it is very sensitive, so even to very little changes of light, for example, like the wind blows through the bushes across in the garden, the system is so responsive it will react to that as well. So the only contextual thing that we related to was actually the dimension of the mullion system. It attaches both to the exterior and the interior of the facade on glass facades. We decided at this point to only work on the facade because the nursery was a very, very small room. To work with something inside that room, you wouldn't be able to even enter the room. So that's why we, in a way, positioned us on the facade. It's a culture heritage house, so you can't really do anything. You can't nail anything. You can't do anything with the building. So we decided to work with suction cups. And we were given an okay from the preservation department that suction cups on the glass was fine. So we worked with a geometry to produce a cell so that it could work with connectivity in different senses. And here's a diagram just showing how we dealt with the Mullion system and how it had to be able to walk across the mullions. Prototyping in Stockholm. The SPOORG system works in individuals and has a great behavior, even if there is perhaps only 4 individuals. And it can grow, and it can grow infinitely. So depending on how you can add and produce more if desired to create a larger complex structure. There was an interest from the MAC to actually have on all the south facades the SPOORG system, but due to budget concerns, we could only work with one of the room facades. It was very important how we thought about the electronics and the electronic components and how they part of the design. And here we're working with the wiring and how the wiring, even if there is radio communication, we have wires between microcontrollers and speaker system, etc. So also so the holes, there are kind of a general amount of holes in the shells or to just provide for wiring or provide for dragging the wires. So that became part of the process, how one can actually work with both the electronic system and the material and the casts or casted plastic cells, and how they actually work very closely together. Prototyping the electronics. And I will also say, as Jonas said when he presented his projects, Pablo Miranda worked on the spline graft and the puzzle. Here it's mostly Pablo Miranda's colleague, Osman Gammelsäter, who worked with us for computing both kind of the physical electronics, but also computing the programming the system, etc. We also work with a couple of composers, Leif Jordansson and Martin Q. Larsson, to somehow, how do you deal with a system that sounds, and how can architecture sound? We are truly invested in design, and we are very interested in design, so that becomes kind of an important, very important aspect. So we, instead of just doing sound ourselves, we think we need to work with professionals. Next time we might not, but this time we did. And so there was a pretty big team that worked on the design of the process. It's a synthetic sound that has some proportion relationship. So it's a reservoir of tones that gets played, and the system modulates the sound in relation to duration of tone and the duration of pause, and also the sound intensity. And those are the only 3 aspects that it modulates. We wanted to work with solar cells for giving it energy, but due to time, and we have to take that on in the next project. Only working this system out and making it a network, I mean, was a lot of work. So that's why you see the wire, the black wire, coming down to plus and minus. So we needed cable for getting power, but that's the only energy source. Here's a principle showing how cells communicate with each other and how it sends information between each other. As I said, At the MAC, it was very much about the nursery, and we started out with the aspect of cultivation in relation to the nursery. In Sevilla, it was a biennale, so there was something else that we had to relate to. And we redistributed the system in relation to the site that we could work with there. And this was is it an old ceramics factory or something? Is this correct? Did you know that? Old ceramics factory. It was a religious place. Oh my. Okay, I did. Anyway. The ceramic fabrication. So in a way, instead of relating so much to the aspect of home and nursery, this relates more to the notion of an exhibition and visitors. And literally, for good and for bad, the Sevilla exhibition, since it was an interactive or media arts biennale, a lot of people, of some reason, wants to go and touch everything. They want to go and hold in everything, which is a new experience that they want to really physically engage with the projects. So this is just diagrams showing how a different kind of pattern of sound emerges. Back at MAC, and here you see the garden and how that and how the green very much was also, of course, related to the context of the garden, which in ideal sense you would actually cast new cells for the Sevilla, but okay, I'm gonna soon finish here. I'm gonna just play a small video. It was shot. Now I'm supposed to nod to someone there to put on the sound. So this was when we were actually fine-tuning SPOORG at MAC, and there are some glitches in this sound that you will hear, but it was in the process of fine-tuning the system. So those glitches, so those very repetitive tones were not there in the kind of the final, but unfortunately I only have this film and this sound. But did he put on the sound? So what was interesting that at the MAC we got feedback a bit about how the system worked. So the curators and the people working comes there every day, they really appreciated SPOORG as more of a companion. So that when they came there in the morning, and if it was dark, it kind of woke up, and it was a company while working in the house. So that was interesting on that kind of intimate level also, how it worked when it was not an opening and when it was not a lot of visitors, but also just being there in a building that was at the beginning designed as a home. Okay.
The next speaker will be Philippe Morel. Philippe is co-founder of EZCT, Architecture and Design Research, and is associate professor at the École Nationale Supérieure d'Architecture in Paris. He will present a project entitled Research on Optimization, Computational Chair Design using Genetic Algorithm that was developed in 2004 and shown at the BIAX, as Marie-Ange showed as well at the beginning of today.
Okay, hello. So first of all, thank you, Claudia, for your kind invitation to present this project to the audience, and thank you, Marie-Ange, for having inviting us to this Biennale in Sevilla. So I will present you a project called computational chair design. Using genetic algorithm. Before that, I want to go back a bit on the reason why we are working on optimization, and also, I should say, a small history of optimization as I envision it. First, I have to say that the method of searching are probably as important as the things we are searching for. In a sense, of course, we never really know what we are searching for. And that's precisely the idea of genetic algorithm, as we will see later. They help us in finding shapes and in finding solutions to problems that we cannot really explain or that we cannot put in a right mathematical way and order. So, and I think it strongly fits with the idea of contemporary research. But through the idea of optimization, I have to say that I was neither really searching for something which was purely technical. I think that optimization today can be considered as a global concept. So it can be considered as a political concept, industrial, social, since optimization techniques are present just everywhere. So I'm not very interested in politics because usually I think it's not very efficient, and it can lead us to some very weird things, as what we can see here on the screen with this very beautiful black arrow. So, but still, optimization is for me a global and political concept. It started, I should say, a long time ago, of course. It was not really defined. It was not defined in the contemporary and technical sense, but it was always present. I mean, there is no architect who is not searching for something better. If you are searching for something better, in a sense, you are just trying to optimize either the form for the city or the shape of a structure or any kind of problem. So, of course, all architects, either it is right or a theoretician like Miliutin with the linear city, or Saarinen and many others try to search to obtain better shapes for the cities. And it's also what happens with architecture. But more or less, all these arguments are science. I mean, they are not founded on a strong and on a precise scientific basis. Actually, it tries to be scientific, but it's not scientific. And in many cases, in a sense, we have to recognize that architects are working in a very analogical way. I mean, during those year 50, it was very, I should say, in the air to think of the network, to think of graphs and diagrams who have different graph shapes. And even architects like Allison and Peter Smithson, they try to optimize the city, but they just remain on very humanistic level. Some others who probably had a stronger scientific background envisioned very different ways of optimizing structures, architectural elements, but also many other things. And in a sense, when we take a look at the consequences of this optimization, what we see is that there are very few models, at least on an urban level, but also on an architectural level, but I think this is more obvious on an urban scale. There are very few models that we can consider as valid if we take a look at our contemporary world. One of these models was drawn by Constantin Doxiadis. It's called Ecumenopolis. I mean, we have to know that the ecumen is the old world before the Copernican revolution for designing the world, actually. And after Copernic, but actually a bit before, but this is another subject. The world started to be called the globe terraqué. I mean, the Earth-made globe, in a sense. But another model which is, I think, valid, theoretically speaking, and I think it's important because we will see some kind of a formal parallelism in the work I will present for the chair, are the researches from Super Studio and Andrea Bronzi. Marie-Ange has shown this morning very interesting images from those avant-garde researchers. So optimization is global. And by global, I mean something very practical. I mean, everybody, as a researcher now, I should say almost as an applied researcher, because the world is very much based on applied science, even if fundamental science is still very, very important, probably more than ever in a sense, at least on an economical level. But when I'm saying that optimization is important on a global scale and on an urban scale, what we see here, for example, is another aspect of optimization, because of course in each of those houses we can envision and we can think of a personal researcher doing research at home. We can think of someone who is working in a factory, who is working in a laboratory. But we have to think of that, of this pattern, as the factory, which allows the very concept of optimization to be today as important as I think it is, actually. especially because of a few very important facts. And one of these facts is the use of grid computing. I mean, the fact that you can, from a place, distribute the calculation on a potentially unlimited number of computers. And this number of computers is very much materialized in this kind of image. So we don't have to think of this in a sense as an urban structure, but we have to think of this as a part of the optimization concept. So maybe it's not very clear to envision it, but it is the same case with this image. So in a sense, there is absolutely no difference between those two images. I mean, because the computer doesn't know any difference between those two images. I mean, it's a factory, a groovy one. It looks unorganized, but it's very organized for the computers. And it is another factory model. It looks more Cartesian. It's a grid, but there is no difference because the computer can communicate between them. And of course, we have exactly the same result at the end. So in the chair model, we will see, because the chair is based on topological optimization, we will see a chair which is based on a grid structure, but actually it has nothing to do with the grid, because it's one of the very first use of topological optimization techniques. So in a sense, the grid which is present in the chair is here only on a mathematical level that I will explain. So the shape of the world is much closer to that. And in a sense, it's becoming just very, very liquid, of course, in an abstract sense, but also in a very concrete aspect. I just strongly believe that the future of factories is highly related to the structure of future living. And between those two things, there is a couple of scientific concepts I'm trying to define, and I'm trying to catch and to theorize, in a sense, to develop. And optimization is one of these concepts. So in architecture, in a sense, in the year 60, we started to think of optimization. For example, here we try to create an optimal climate indoor, and actually those things correspond to the very let's say to the golden period of numerical method for optimization. I mean, optimization was invented in a sense as a very scientific concept in the 19th century, but then it was not really available for mathematicians before the invention of the computer. So we have to think that optimization was operational during the year 30 and mostly during the Second World War in American laboratories. And this is the beginning of the golden age of numerical optimization. And this numerical optimization, of course, is linked to many other media aspects and to a deep change in society. Because without optimization, at least numerical optimization, we wouldn't probably have been able to formalize information theory and to make it become a very early computer or TV screens or things like that. So if I'm showing this image here, it's because in a sense, when we worked on this project, we worked with two scientists, Atem Amda and Mark Schonauer, from the INRIA Institute in France, which means the National Institute for Research in Computer Science and Automated Process, more or less. It means something like that. We were a bit like that in a sense, with one computer controlling many different computers, actually 12 computers, not, I mean the number was precise. We had 12 computers which were dispersed in other schools that we could use. So when we worked on this, we started to think of the creation of architecture as something very isolated, at the same time very connected, very automated, and I would say unphysically related. Marie-Ange was mentioning this morning the hyper-specificity of some architect. At some point, in a sense, we are on the other side just hyper-generic. Because there is no specificity at all in the work we are developing. So another aspect of optimization is the fact that it doesn't lead to known structures. It kind of reproduces the evolution of science and the evolution of building in history. Here, as we can see, we have some kind of a family. What Marie-Ange was calling this morning an ecology. In our work, we are using the term computational ecology, and this was the beginning of an ecology. In a sense, in industries, there is always some kind of ecology, because you have one person working on a certain problem, a precise one, and then other researcher come, etc., etc., and it just creates a family. And some artists like Bernd and Ila Brayer here envision this aspect of an industrial civilization as a very ecological one, as a very human-related or biology-related civilization. And other architects like Negroponte here started to think of architecture as something very machinic as well, mechanistic, but I would say more machinic than mechanistic here. And he was one of the very first to think of self-organizing structure made of cubes, as we can see here. And also with John Fraser and a couple of others, during the 70s, many progresses were done in those fields. But in a sense, the year 80s kind of stopped all this research because we entered a stylistic postmodernism, which is very far from our actual effective postmodernism, because we are probably still in a postmodernist era, maybe more than ever. But the thing is that this postmodernist era is based on the highly intensive use of computers. So optimization was always present, as we can see here. Those images are, come from a book from Ludwig Hilberseimer, which is entitled Beton as Gestalter. It was published in 1928. And here as well, it comes from this Ludwig Hilberseimer book. What we see on those images, for example, is that we see different kind of structures. All of them have some kind of very rough optimization. Of course, those holes can be considered as the true mark of what optimizing a structure could be. Because if we would keep the matter here, it would just add dead weight and it wouldn't serve any kind of structural purpose. So all those pillars, structures, are, representative of early optimization thinkings in architecture. But what we see, and I think this is something quite interesting, is that on those four elements, the three on the right, they all have the same shape. They are all vertical, they are all singular, and they all have the same principle of having holes into them. There is no kind of topological optimization into those structure, because the engineer has a determined idea of the way he's going to optimize the structure. And in the chair project, there weren't any kind of predetermined determined idea of what the final result would be. This also is one of the early result of optimization. It is kind of simple, and it's considered by Charles Jenks as the first explicit indeterminate building where the structural uprights are distributed according to loads and not to a determined geometric pattern. So as we see, we have less structure on the top because we just have less load, and it's kind of easy. And here the computer didn't really enter the process of creating this optimized building, but still the idea is very present. So those things I tried already a couple of years ago to let's say to wrap those theoretical ideas in different work and things like exhibition and things like that, were all more or less related to optimization. So the optimization is just present everywhere at the moment. Here I just show you the images going to the concept of something integral and integrated. It's not just directly related to the chair, but it just shows us what kind of optimization thinking can be put into action. So for some people, of course, those optimization techniques are really the mark of a very positivist philosophical thinking, or maybe some idea of progress, which I don't believe it is in a sense. I don't think that optimization is related to progress or something like that. I just consider it as a very simple fact. And these facts actually lead us to new development every day. As it was said this morning, we are just entering a very new period with many fundamental changes on each scale on the society. Either it is financial or sociological, political, scientific, and etc. And still some people and architects are interested in shapes and some kind of very weird old-fashioned references for architects. So actually I don't really know why, especially if we take a close look at what is happening today, but still it is present. So we can't envision and we can't think of optimization, and we can think of the design we presented in the Sevilla Biennale without the idea of communication. of course, the idea of wireless communication. Here we see an image of the very first wireless guided submarine missile. Actually, it was a patent. It was never built by anybody, but Nikola Tesla was the inventor of this. And of course, communication then started to enter the scene with the internet and with what we just know today as this very dense and complex network of phones and computer. Here we see on the right an antenna tree in the south of France, and here on the left a real-time view of telecommunication through mobile phones. So information is very important. Here this image is showing the kind of design we are achieving those days. Actually, we see this plane as one of the example of a purely performative design which is created by a computer. Actually, most of the older plane were continuing the tradition of analogical thinking, and it was very present in the very first prototypes of plane, trying to mimic the way birds are flying. And actually, we all know that the physics of planing, I mean, yeah, sorry, is very different when you have large and big loads like that than the physics of bird planning. So the thing is that in military sciences, we are using probably the most the optimization techniques among all the different users. We find very interesting things because the design is always performative. We always know for which purpose a piece of design is built, actually, and it's very clear. So for the chair, that's what we were searching for. I mean, just trying to optimize the chair for what it is supposed to be. I mean, to put some loads on it and nothing else. No idea of shape and no idea of nothing. So I will go a bit fast on those things, even if I think they could be interesting, because I want that we keep some time for the so I pass those things and then I present you. Can you tell me how long I have? Okay. Yeah, it won't. Yeah, I will. Okay. Okay, so this project, the chair, was first presented at Archilab in 2004, and then it was acquired by the Centre Pompidou and presented there, and there are a couple of versions which are built of this object. So the chair is based on a very classical optimization scheme. Actually, you just create a structure, you evaluate the structure is considered as a phenotype, and you have an internal representation for the computer which is considered as a genotype. So it's based, it was done with two scientists from the INRIA, and it's based on a very simple model of bit array genotype. I mean, either you have some matter or you don't have any kind of matter in the object. So the first tests were done by those two scientists in the optimization techniques for cantilever project. And first in 2D, in 2 dimension, as we can see here, trying to optimize the weight of the structure. here we also see an optimization of the bicycle frame. I mean moving from something which doesn't look like a bicycle frame at all to something which starts to resemble a bicycle frame. The only difference is that probably it took humanity 200 years to move from this model to that one, and it just took a month to the computer to do it. So this is why optimization, at least for me, cannot be considered on a purely technical level, because it changed so many things in the logic of discovery and innovation that we can think of it as just another technique for creating interesting shapes or interesting buildings as far as it concerns architecture, at least. So then they tried to apply these techniques to a three-dimensional cantilever with only one load, as we can see here. It's very isolated. And then we contacted, I remember calling Mark Schonauer and Atem in order to propose them to, if they would like to apply, their optimization techniques into a very basic and fundamental object, which is the chair, since it would be a good case study in a sense. So they said yes, and we produced 25 chairs with them. We started with a block of matter, and we will see it on the animation. Then it became smaller and smaller. But one thing that we can see here is that, for example, here you have holes. And this is really the idea of this kind of topological optimization. If you remember the Ludwig Hilbert-Zeimer electrical structures in concrete, is that with a topological optimization, you don't have to define any kind of shape for the computer. You don't have to tell him that you want to have holes or things like that. And most of all, you can really go further into the concept of optimization, because these techniques will create some holes when it's available. And with other non-topological optimization techniques, holes will never appear, actually. That's why we can obtain that kind of very, very weird shape for a chair with two feet in diagonal with a big holes into it here, and having still a chair which is valid. Here is another chair which was presented in a gallery in the suburbs of Paris, in Noisy-le-Sec. And here it's the same chair, which look like a Paris Hilton dog in a sense. But we didn't really choose the shape of it, but it's a very technological version of it. And here we see the 25 chair. So I show you the animation, which is on this Mac computer. And then for the technical question, I think it's better to have this in the discussion afterwards. I'm not a Mac specialist, so. So, in the discussion, I will be able to explain you, some technical and more engineer engineering-based question and problems. Actually, here we see a Voronoi diagram, but this diagram was used for the internal representation of the phenotype. It has nothing of the genotype. Sorry, it has nothing to do with the shape of the chair in itself, but it's very much adapted because it's a self-reorganizing structure. So when the shape of an object changes, it's very easy to re-represent it in a mathematical way and then to re-put the parameter in a computer. If you work with regular orthogonal grids, it becomes much more difficult and it asks for much more calculation power. And on the left here, on the bottom left, we see the generations. So it will move. Actually, yeah, it starts. So for, I think the most evaluated chair has 860 generation, and for each generation we did create 100 individuals. So actually, more or less, each chair is asking if it's an average of 400 or 500 generations. Each chair is asking for 40 to 50,000 structural evaluations. So that's why we had no other choice than using, this is another chair which is called Model Test 2 on the right, on the lowest down right side of the image, sorry. So that one has 700 generations. Some of these chairs are not stable by themselves because they were computed for sitting on it. So when you sit on the chair, it's perfectly stable. So in a sense, you physically feel the equilibrium and the symbiotics of the object because it was really made for a certain purpose, actually. But for other chairs, like the one which is presented at the Pompidou and which was first presented at Archilab, the very first chair we physically built, that one was computed for having different positions of sittings. So of course it stands alone because it was computed for that. As you see here, this chair at the moment is not stable, but in a sense, at the end, it should re-become stable because it's. I mean, when you interrupt the calculation, it doesn't mean that you interrupt it at the moment when the chair is stable. In a sense, it's a converging process. So you have to push it until a certain point to make sure that you start to enter the reliable domain of, the domain of reliable results. So I think it's okay. It can stay. So. Thanks.
A project that is the Digital Water Pavilion that was presented at the Expo in Saragossa last year in 2008. Okay.
Claudia, thank you very much. Does this work? Do we have a... Do you have one of the... It is on, actually. No, I'd like to use this, if I can. It is on. Is it working? Hello. Hello. Yes, thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. So, yes, I'll give you a quick overview of some of the projects we are doing, and in particular also the project we presented at CEVI just a few months ago. And the title of the presentation, Living Architecture, it's a few projects, both as Sensible, that's sensible@mit.edu, you can find on the website at MIT, and also in the office in Torino, that's carloratti.com. So, how to start? Well, this morning Brett was saying about, the 1990, 1995, think about Nicolas Negroponte. I think 1993, that's when the first browser emerged. That was Mosaic, very, very clumsy. And this in 1990, people were so fascinated about the internet and everything virtual, so they thought really the physical would disappear. There's a Gilder in 1995, he said, we are headed for the death of cities, because of the death of space, because of the death of distance, thanks to the nets. So we'll have the death of space and the death of cities, and cities, he said, are leftover baggage from the industrial time. It's a tough job to be a futurologist, especially people look back at what you said like 15 years ago, and we all know the story now that today, the past 15 years have been a time of incredible urbanization, incredible building and space making. That's an image from Tianjin. I took this picture a couple of days ago in Singapore. That's what I saw from my hotel room. So construction everywhere. And actually, as we all know, in 2008, for the first time ever, half of the world's population is actually living in cities. And China itself alone is planning to build more cities than all of humanity ever built. So what happened then? Well, instead of what Gilder was saying, that the digital would kill the physical, if you imagine the digital on the top, these layers of information that we have, and if you imagine the physical on the bottom, then the digital didn't kill the physical, but it's creating a new condition that's digital and physical together. If you want, bits and atoms combined. And so it's something I would say, it's like a new type of design, is it? People and space and technology combined together. In a certain sense, I think today is a very important time. I mean, today for the symposium, but today in these years, we're in a very similar condition as Corbusier in 1923 in Vers une architecture, when he wrote, the machine civilization is looking for and needs to find its architectural expression. Just remove machine and put digital, and then digital civilization is looking for and has to find today its architectural expression. Well, what is it going to be? Is it going to be something like this? This is Greg Lynn. I don't think so. I think this was fun. We'll keep on doing something like this, but I think the living architecture we'll see in the future is something very different. It's a much more profound engagement between the digital and the physical, and if you want, combining really bits and atoms. And this is something that we should do as architects. Otherwise, somebody else will do. I'll start with the project. This is the first project. The two groups I mentioned, Sensible and the office in Italy, started more or less 5 years ago. So this is the first project we did, and I was still at MIT working at the Media Lab with Nicolas Negroponte and Hiroshi Ishii, and that was at Ars Electronica in Linz in 2004. We called it Sandscape. It's not really architecture, but the idea was to have a space for playing with sand and augmented sand with digital information. So you moved on this surface, you mold it, and you create shape on it, and the computer captures it, either with a laser scanner in real time or with infrared technology, and then it gets a 3D geometry and sends back information onto that. I'll show you a quick video. This is a simplified version. The first version was with a laser scanner on the top. The laser scanner is quite expensive, so we then did a cheaper version. You see in a moment it's infrared light on the bottom, and then you got a camera on the top, you get a 3D geometry in real time, you calculate it, you process it, and then you project it back onto the sand. So it's like trying on an interface to merge bits and atoms together. So a ceiling-mounted camera captures the light coming from underneath, and we call it Standscape. It's glass beads, actually. And it becomes a completely malleable thing that seems like physical, but it contains also digital information. We did that, one of the applications is if you want to explore a model, like in GIS, but it's like a tangible GIS, so you can decide a number of analyses, like the height, or the shadow, or the slope, or the water, and then while you do it physically in real time, you get also that information from the computer. This was actually at Linz, at Ars Electronica, with people playing with it. I'll skip it. It's an old project, but I thought I'll show it because it really helped then for us in all what we did after this, trying to really put together bits and atoms, combine them. So the next project, that was 2005. It was in Graz at the Kunsthaus, the funny-looking building by Peter Cook. And over there was an exhibition called M-City. And what we said, well, today everybody has an iPhone, has a phone in the pocket, and so what if we can actually map the city? At the time it has never been done, map a whole city in real time using all the information from the cell phones. It was 2005, it had never been done, it was the first time. You get anonymous information, you analyze it, process it, and try to understand how the city lives or pulsates. So this is static information, but imagine it's moving, and this is a snapshot. You see there's a big exchange, transport exchange on the top right. You can see the Kunsthaus, the little thing on the bottom, and the main city center in Graz with the river in the middle. So we started looking at this. You can do other type of things. Every line is actually information, packets of information migrating from one cell phone tower to another cell phone tower. So if you do it in real time, you get a sense. We call this like real-time Graz. No, actually, we call it mobile landscapes. But you get these flows that move in the city. So we started with this. I put this thing. Actually, this was published in Domus in respected scientific journals. We never made it to FHM. That's the only time FHM in Hungarian. And so I thought that we were very proud of being published in FHM. Also, I can never show this picture in the US, so I think in Europe, when I give a presentation in Europe, I can do it. In the US, they will put me in jail if I were to show this. So following that, 2006, like 2 years ago, Ricky Burdett, a professor at the London School of Economics, he was in charge of the Venice Biennale. And the Venice Biennale that year was about cities. So he had seen the project in Graz and liked it and said, well, how could we do this for a city, perhaps a city in Italy? So we actually selected Rome and tried to see this utopia that a lot of engineers at MIT have, is the idea of an Internet of Things, a vision, a moment when every object will be connected, taggable, addressable, and we know the position of everything we have in any time. It's like a one-to-one map of the planet. So this thing will happen very soon with the RFID revolution, but how much of that can we approximate today? So this is the pavilion that Ricky Burdett gave us at the Biennale, and we put some old projects on the side, and in the middle we did this project called Real-Time Rome, trying to capture as much information as we could from the city in real time. we had, again, all the information from cell phones, so the cell phone network, really a huge amount of data in this case for 3 million people. And then we had all the taxis in the city, all the buses in the city, and other networks. So all of this information flowing constantly, going to MIT, being analyzed, and being sent in real time back to the pavilion at the Biennale. On the side, we had old projects like Sandscape that you see here. So I'll show you something. This is also as an homage for our French guests. This is, remember 2006 is when Italy and France were fighting for the World Cup, the soccer World Cup. And look at what happens in Rome, based on cell phone network activity, the day of the final, when Italy won and France lost. I'm sorry. So that's before the match, the day of the final. You see, before the match, it's a normal day in Rome. The match begins silence, so no information on the network anymore. France scores, Italy scores, halftime, that's when people go to the bathroom and make a quick call. And then second half, end of normal time, first overtime, second overtime, Zidane, remember, red card, Italy wins. Then that night, people went to celebrate up to the upper left corner. The following day, people went to meet the prime minister and the winning team on the upper left side. And then they went down next to the Colosseum, to the big park. And you see this peak, actually at night, becoming very, very big. And so this is sort of like real-time information that you get about the city, and you can process it. I'll skip it. So following this project, the people at the MoMA, Paola Antonelli was organizing an exhibition a few months ago called Design and the Elastic Mind. So she had seen this video and she liked it and asked if she could have it for the exhibition. But we thought for MoMA we should really do something new, show something else. So this is what we did. We established a collaboration with AT&T, the largest operator in the States. And we really were, by this time, we really didn't want to do anything with cell phone. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of research you can still do. But in this case, we wanted to show actually how New York connects to the whole planet. So we called it New York Talk Exchange. And what you have here is the AT&T network, the largest in the country, in the United States. And all the information that flows, again, in real time, from New York to all other cities. You see daytime, that's dark. Sorry, nighttime, that's dark, and you see daytime. And this information is changing geographically, and is changing because of the time of the day, and the difference in how do you say? I'm sorry, I just came this morning from the States, so I'm a bit jet lagged. The difference in time zones. So you see like the increase when the morning starts. You see. And then it decreases when evening comes. And you can zoom in, like here you can see London waking up, a lot of information being exchanged with the financial center, or what used to be the financial center perhaps. And then you got South America, waking up. Increase of information, Buenos Aires, the main Brazilian hubs, Rio, Sao Paulo. And then Asia, this is Asia going to sleep actually, but still being very active in you see Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong. It's surprising how little activity you have in Africa. Look at, it's not a full mapping, but it's the largest network, so it tells you quite a lot, and you can use this and do a lot of analysis. So you can actually take it, mathematically model. There's 5 mathematicians in the group. The group has been growing at MIT quite a bit, about 25 people now. There's 5 mathematicians actually looking at the data now. Trying to really make sense of it and understand better how we are all interconnected on this planet, and how things that we do here are affecting the global network of cities. There's something else interesting that you can do with this type of data. Forget about the global, go local, go inside the city. And this is New York, so it's Staten Island, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx. And if you look at every pixel, how every pixel connects to the whole world in a different way. So how in the rich part of the city, like Manhattan, connects more to the rich part of the world. And what you see here is like a DNA map. You got there the color code, and you can see how much of South America you have. You see a lot of South America in the Bronx up there, a lot of South America in the center of Queens, very little South America in Manhattan. So you can do this, and it's like a kind of, and then you can zoom in and look at things. some very funny things happened. In one case, in one of the pixels, we looked at the number one destination from the pixel was Guyana. So we thought, well, maybe Guyana is a very tiny country in South America. And we thought that was a mistake perhaps in the data. So we went to New York actually and see what was going on. And actually that was really one of the largest Guyanese community and enclave in Queens that was spotted by this. Is a kind of real-time census. We presented this at the MoMA. We had very interesting reactions. Airlines wanted to use the data to plan new routes. People like Western Union were interested in the data, people who plan money transfers. A politician wanted to get hold of the data to tailor his presentations in a better way when he had to talk there. And of course, we didn't give it to him. So, as I said, we're doing quite a lot of analysis on this. That's an issue of Seed magazine from this month on with some of our preliminary results, really about trying to understand the deep nature of cities. Have you ever thought of why cities exist? If you think about 4,000 years ago, all of us, we wouldn't be in cities. Well, let's say, no, maybe more 6,000 years ago. We'd be hunter and gatherers, and there would be no cities. And then cities start existing, and there's this big revolution that led to 50% of the world's population now living in cities. What will happen in 5 years? How should we urbanize the planet? Why don't we do the planet like we do why don't we do the planet like we do Manhattan, where we put all the people in one place and keep all the rest green, like Central Park? So, there's a number of fascinating questions that we can actually look at in terms of connections between cities using this data. Well, being from MIT, I thought I'll scare some architects with some formulas. I'll skip to another project that was presented. It's on at the moment at the Design Museum in Barcelona. And what we did here is actually forget about networks, big centralized network. But think about the information that all of us collect and share, about user-generated content that we share and what that could tell us. Now, we all know that there's, the physical layer and the digital layer we are uploading. That's like a simple Google map. And I'll skip this just because of time. But we all know that there's more and more pictures being taken everywhere. And a lot of these pictures end up in Flickr, on Flickr. And a lot of these pictures actually are open for everybody to look on Flickr. So if you develop a little script and go and look at the public pictures on Flickr, and you got millions of pictures, and then you develop a little script to see also the timestamp on the picture, and people disclose their profile, so you got that information as well. So when you do it, you can actually look at interesting maps. This is the initial work that Fabien in the group did a couple of years ago. It was Italy, and he looked at like Florence, the density of pictures being taken. So you see Florence, you see Tuscany, and you see the main cities in Tuscany with Firenze. You see downtown, where people go downtown, and actually to the little detail where people georeference picture and all the picture they've taken. So that's zooming in from the region to the city to the neighborhood. And you see, interesting thing, for instance, if you then look at the pictures and take the timestamp and look at trajectories, here you see on the left, for instance, you see how Americans move in Tuscany and how Italians move in Tuscany. So to the left, you see a kind of elephant's path. So you got the main points and nodes, which makes sense. If you're American, you will spend just a week in Italy and you go to the main cities. Well, if you're Italian, look at how you look at the place in a different way. So I'll show you a quick video from Barcelona, what we have now there. I'll have to show it here. It could just, it's better than, oops, embedding it. So, so here you see every, it's data from all of last year. You see actually from all 2007. And you see each flickering is actually a picture being taken and uploaded on Flickr. And you see also the picture while it's going up. And so you see where the photographers are. But then you can also zoom in and see, for instance, where the locals are. And what is the difference between the locals and the other people? You see there to the left what it represents. And I'll go very quickly. You can see where Britons are. Take pictures. And then you can actually classify pictures based on image processing, so you can get all the green pictures. So it's like, in this case, we're like borrowing the eyes of hundreds of thousands of people that are scanning the world and uploading picture, and like using everybody's sensing capability and then sharing that and using that to create a map. And in this case, you see all the green pictures, green and dry draft are our main problem in Spain. In this case, you can sort of almost monitor the green parts of the country. And then you can also zoom in into Barcelona. So where are the parties in Barcelona? So pictures that relate to parties, and you can map them here. I will stop here. I will just tell you that one of the students actually is doing some very sophisticated analysis to see if there could possibly be any correlation between the geography of Brits and parties in Barcelona. But I haven't got the results yet. I'll go now to another type of approach of trying to combine bits and atoms, but this time in a more tangible way in public space. And this is actually the project that Marie-Ange selected for the Biennale in Seville. That is at the World Expo. It opened this year 80%, and it will be fully completed in a few months. The idea started at MIT a couple of years ago when the mayor of Zaragoza came to us and said, could you help us, could you give some ideas about for the city, for public space, and for the expo? The theme of the expo was water, and Zaragoza was about to launch a big project called the Digital Mile, about digital technology in public space. So he came to us, and so we did a class that was led by Bill Mitchell, Dennis Frenchman, and myself. And we explored a number of ideas, including this one. This at the moment was more like a fountain. And imagine you have a pipe with many thousand little valves opening and closing and creating like a wall made of water. But this wall is made of pixels made of water. And then if you add sensor, you can actually have a system that when you approach it, it will open, let you in, let you jump, and it becomes like an interactive piece of public space based on water. That was the initial idea. We presented it to the mayor. The mayor actually loved it. He loved the idea of sort of, it's a bit like Mose. You go there and the water opens. And so he loved it. And he said, well, you should design a building at the entrance of the expo just before Zaha Hadid's bridge, just a pavilion to show this. So we came up with this idea called Digital Water Pavilion. That was like a year ago. So no doors. When you approach it, it will open to let you in. Also, the roof will be covered in water. That's the bridge by Zaha, next to it. And if there's wind, you want to minimize splashing, you can lower the roof. And when you close the building at night or during the winter, you can actually, the architecture can disappear. So our idea is how can we really have something where the whole architecture can be changed, appear and disappear. And inside the building, actually, this we did at MIT and in Italy at the office, so together. Many projects we've done as a collaboration, in this case also with ARUP, Agence Terre in France for landscape. So the idea is how can we do an architecture that then, thanks to digital technology, become really like a living architecture, expanding and shrinking. Inside the building, if you've got more people, you can actually move the walls and the space can expand and shrink based on necessity and use. So that was the idea. When we presented it, they thought we were a bit nuts, also with the roof that moves up and down. You know, it's not easy, it's not something standard you can do, but then again, the mayor loved it. And if you had asked me a year ago if this would be built, I would have said no. But actually, they built it. So they started in February, and by the summer for the expo, it was completed 80%. We put together a group working very fast, Boston, so MIT, in Italy, the office in Torino, graphic designers in Milan, FM Studio, landscape architects in Paris, and then in Spain we had ARUP Spain, London and Madrid, and then project leaders. And the interesting thing is that to build it, they actually didn't find a normal company, they found Siemens. So it's interesting that, then companies that usually do other things then are jumping into this type of architecture. And this is the scheme of the building. So you got the roof on pistons, you got the water walls, they can change shape and position. And then you got a basement because they wanted, well, the basement, it's not really needed, but it's cheaper to do it because you want to have the pistons going down, so it's easier, cheaper to excavate. And also they wanted a space for lectures in the basement, so that's why we did it 3 stories. The idea is that this was designed with a Janster. It's a very, very long axis, very dark and covered with fog and a bit of water. So the idea is that when the building is down, you don't see anything. You have just this long boulevard. And then when the building is up, then you have a full 3D architecture coming out from the space. This was one of the guys at MIT. You see a T-shirt there at the opening trying to make sense of the water controllers. There are 3,000 valves, each of them individually controlled by a computer. This was a guy a bit puzzled while we were doing the testing at the beginning. Just some random patterns. And here just a couple of images. They also tried to project onto the curtain. That's what you see here. That was myself actually trying to get in and not getting wet, trying to see if the curtain would open. I'll show you a couple of, a very short, this is just Discovery Channel did a video, and a few others.
The digital water pavilion in Zaragoza, Spain. It's a showpiece of the 2008 World Expo.
Expos has always been, I don't know why we don't see the... Okay. That's a bridge by Zach at the end. The patterns here were not very good. It was still being tested.
Spain. It's a showpiece of the 2008 World Expo.
Expos has always been... Okay. And, yeah, that's not interesting, but I just want to show you the... Sorry, well, I just want to show you the... Anyway, the patterns, there's something interesting we found out, actually, that... I'll stop this. There's something interesting we found out that we thought that people would love an architecture that would respond and really open a door when you approach and so on. And then one day, all the sensors didn't work. Problem with Windows or whatever, and all the building wouldn't be responsive at all. And actually we found out that people loved it much more. That night, all the kids from Zaragoza came to the building. And the reason is that instead of having a building that would open when you approach it, then you had to jump through the holes in the water without getting wet. So that became sort of the hotter game of the night. And we found out it's interesting that people prefer to engage with the building more in a fighting way, in a sort of playful, fighting way, instead of having a totally responsive architecture that simply follows what you want to do. So the building then became something with its own personality, and you had to fight and get into the building without getting wet. Or if you get wet, it's very warm, so it didn't matter much. I think we are almost done. I'll show you just a couple of things. This is something we'll show this year. It's the first time I'm showing it publicly. We call it Pin Up, Pin Down. It's for an hotel chain. The idea is, what if you fly a lot, you stay in many different rooms. How can you have rooms that still are very personalized while they are in many different places? How can you have a place that fits you like a glove, but you have many pairs of gloves? So the idea is, this is an image from they use for measuring your feet. So many pins that take a 3D shape. You might be familiar with that. So why don't you do the whole room with this, with linear actuator? They're not much expensive anymore. And then we can do something like this. If you go back home with 2 people or 3 people, you can have a bigger bed. Even give you a massage. Use it to host friends and
everywhere I go, there's always something to remind me of another place in time, where love that traveled far and found me
similar to Sanskrit, to the initial idea I showed you.
We didn't talk, I knew. Until you asked what I was thinking. Until you asked what I was thinking.
I'll skip this project that was initially at Venice Biennale 2006. It's another thing with pervasive computing, a projector that allows you any surface that's built. We did the design in Italy to project on any surface around you in a pervasive way. I'll skip this because I think we don't have time. I'll show you a couple of very quick projects that or things we're planning to do. That's perhaps London 2010 to be shown at, we still don't know. We are discussing with a number of institutions. We've patented a type of glass that actually can change transparency in this way, what you see here. So it becomes like a screen, but changes opacity. And then this is a project actually I'm presenting also because we did with Alex Ho, who's here today, and who's at the IA. And here is a quick video.
About privacy, our homes and domestic lives, our public spaces, our day-to-day agreements and transactions, the papers we read, and the TV we watch, the internet we browse, and the products we consume. Everything is pervaded by issues of identity, personal security, and, above all, privacy. Our data is public. We are always on camera. Systems and software track us wherever we move. We have nowhere to hide. Yet we also dream of exposure, of revealing it all, of living out in the open, liberated, free. We love the privacy invasions of reality TV. We vote for Big Brother, and we cannot get enough of pervasive surveillance.
So the idea is that you do something that's
but we hardly ever build it. We build glass walls, not spaces. Spacebook is our first real glass box. All surfaces, in every direction molded from transparent glass, with uninhibited 360-degree views. It allows us to see everything.
So let me tell you, so the idea is that it's like a little bit of a joke about, all of the 20th century was about this glass box. And beautiful, I mean, it's Mies and then it's Philip Johnson. But still, it's a glass box, but you have a roof, and you have a bathroom, and you have a lot of opaque stuff. So why don't we do then something, let's really do the glass box. It's fully glass, everything is glass, but then thanks to the digital, this glass changes opacity. So you can be naked in the house, and you decide, like on Facebook, so that's why the name is Facebook, like on Facebook, you decide the level of transparency to the outside world, and then this spatial glass will actually mask you just where you need to be masked. So you can be naked inside, but nobody will actually see you. And the way you can do it is actually by tracking the position, by having all the geometry of the surfaces, and by using the glass as a filter between the inside and the outside. And the way we're developing this is with Dan Graham, an artist from New York. So the idea is to do together this pavilion and present it, hopefully in London in a year and a half.
They love electrochromic glass between them at the precise desired surface, where privacy is most wanted. You can even choose to block the secondary views reflected in the glass. Rather than cloaking the occupant, the shadow blocks the viewer, restricting their gaze rather than her freedom. As the occupant moves, her shadow shield follows to keep her invisible. As the viewer moves, the shadow recalibrates to maintain the precise minimum privacy for the occupant inside. More people generate more shadows, their area kept to the necessary minimum, maximizing views which are constantly changing.
So you actually can have this pixelated effect on. just because of lack of time, I'll stop it here. We're working on 2 projects at the moment, also in the group. Copenhagen, we're designing a hybrid bike that has, it's like a Toyota Prius, that has an engine that regenerates energy inside and then gives it to you when you need it. It also monitors air pollution and position when you move. And we're working for New York in a project that it's one slide. It's one slide. It's track trash. So we put smart tags onto trash, and then we follow trash as it moves through the sanitation system. This will be at the Architecture League later this year, so that you can actually see your object, the final journey of your daily objects, and also you can better understand the removal chain and the trash removal system. I'll finish with this, how to combine bits and atoms. And if any of you is interested in working with us, that's our email, and that's the people who actually did most of the stuff you saw. I'm only presenting it, but they did the hard work. Thanks a lot.